Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's conversation. Here in home office, I have Amy with me. And most important, I have Sarah Simmons, who is the founder and executive director of Her Future Coalition. She is joining us from St. Augustine, Florida. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Vina, and hi, everyone in the Dining for Women community.
Oh, wonderful. So, Sarah, we thought we would just have a conversation, just have questions back and forth. So, why don't you start with telling us about Her Future Coalition's origin story? How did this all come about?
Well, 15 years ago, I had a completely different kind of life. I was working as a songwriter and recording music for film and television, mostly soap operas, for which I wrote the love and death scenes. And my husband was an investment banker, and our children were very little. We lived in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. As part of my work in songwriting, one of my songs was chosen for a feature film, and that film was debuting at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. So I went down to see this movie with very great excitement that this was going to jump my musical career up to the next level and completely change my life. And it did turn out to be a very life-changing experience going down to Tribeca, but not at all in the way I expected. I had a lot of activities associated with my song being in that film. But I'm also a huge independent film buff. So I was really excited to be able to go and see with my free pass some of the other movies that were available at the festival. But when I looked into the catalog of films available and compared them against the time that I had available, which was sort of limited, turned out the only movie available was a documentary about human trafficking of girls for sex between Nepal and India. And I'll be very honest with you, unlike the incredible women of Dining for Women who bravely and courageously take on these very difficult issues every single month and openly learn about them and try to figure out how to get involved in them, I actually opened that catalog and said, yeah, I'm not going to go see that movie. Because I felt that I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. And my mom had recently died. I was grieving, and I thought, I'm at this point in my life. I have these little kids. This is going to be a devastating movie, and what am I going to be able to do about it? So I decided not to go. But upon reviewing further in the catalog, there truly was no other film available in my time frame. And so, extremely begrudgingly, I went to see this movie. And I'm so glad I did, because it was an incredible documentary that highlighted this incredibly large and devastating issue that's happening in our world and was happening then and continues to happen now that I really did not understand. I think you occasionally hear about it in the press, more so now than then, but still it seems to be this isolated issue that, is tragically happening to a few people very far away. And watching this documentary, I learned of the scope of human trafficking, which is in the millions. In fact, the most recent report from the UN and Walk Free estimates that there's 40 million men, women, and children around the world who are living in slavery. And between 10 and 18% of those, or 10 and 18 million, of those are in South Asia, in India and Nepal. So this movie definitely opened my eyes to the scope of the issue, to the suffering that this issue was creating in the lives of the most vulnerable young girls who were trafficked typically between the ages of 8 and 13 years of age, taken from their home, most never to return, never to see their families again, taken far away into these brothels where they probably didn't speak the language, no one could communicate with them, being gang raped, abused, violently, suffering hunger and torture and utter dehumanization in the way that shame was used to manipulate them, which is such a strong and powerful emotion for us. And seeing how their lives, in many cases were destroyed or even ended by this. And then, even when people were able to escape, how the families and communities often rejected them, blaming them for the abuse, or feeling that this brought shame upon the family, or that they were now worthless and there was no future possible for them. In many cases, suffering from HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and other STDs and other severe health issues that made life very difficult. So all of that together, and seeing what this was happening to these young girls, I was just galvanized into action. And I felt that I needed to do something about this. I needed to really do an about face in my life and turn around and start taking action against this. What was even more motivating about that particular film, I mean, it certainly highlighted the horror of the issue and the tremendous need in the world, but it also showed people from every walk of life who are doing something about it, people who are taking action about it in their own communities. And not all of them were, international agencies or people with all this experience. Sometimes it was just a local teacher or a social worker or a mother who saw, wow, girls are disappearing and this is happening in my community, and decided to take action. And some of the people who were having the most powerful impact were survivors themselves, who, after having been trafficked and rescued, were then going back into brothels because they know where girls are hidden, behind the walls, under the floorboards, under the carpets. And they knew how to build trust with girls and help them to escape. They were also going to the borders and stopping every car and looking for suspicious situations. They were facing down every day the trauma that they had experienced, and they had the courage to do something about it. And more than anything, that is what made me feel I could do something about it. Now, obviously, at that moment in time, I didn't have all the required skills. I was, a songwriter for soap operas living on Cape Cod. And I thought, how am I going to be able to impact this? But again, I saw that other people were doing it, and I knew that there had to be a way. So I set out on this journey, which later became our Future Coalition. And my first step, since I didn't really know where to start, was to just contact some of the agencies featured in the film and ask them what kind of help they needed. And fortunately, one of them responded, and I was able to volunteer for a year in the United States doing some fundraising and PR for them. And while I did that, I just got online and read books, and I just learned as much as I could about the issue. And I really tried to get some more expertise in this highly nuanced and complicated issue, and so that I would have more to offer. So a year later, I was invited to go visit this shelter in Nepal, and there it really cemented my decision to do something about this, because I saw at that shelter at that time, there were 800 women and girls and many babies who had been rescued with their mothers, who had all been rescued, from various kinds of human trafficking, and were now trying to rebuild their lives. I met a mom who came with like a dog-eared Polaroid of her missing daughter who'd been gone for 11 days. And just the look in that mother's face, myself also as a mother, it was something I'll never forget. And it definitely brought home to me the suffering and the need that is going on in the world, and the urgency for us all to stand up and do something about it. Because I was coming in, somewhat from the outside, I'm not South Asian, obviously, and was somewhat new to this issue by that point, I decided to try to take a humble approach and ask the people who were doing the work effectively, what were the needs, and what was missing, what was working, and where they still needed help and support, and where they might see that I could fit into that and be able to support the situation. And I asked several shelters and organizations for survivors, and all of them gave me the same answer, which was the need for economic opportunities. And when girls are rescued at a young age, 11 or 12 or 14, often it's possible for them to rejoin society through education. Sometimes they can return to their families, but even if not, getting them a mainstream education and getting them through class 10 or into college really provides a way for them to rejoin society. But for girls who are rescued at a later age, which many are, 15, 16, or in their early 20s, and it may never have even been to kindergarten, education may not be an option, or at least a formal education. We certainly always try to provide literacy and remedial education to the extent that they want. But like many young people, these older survivors really want to be able to move out and support themselves and have some independence and buy some pots and pans. Maybe they have children that they want to be able to support. Maybe they want to get married. They just want all the things that young women all over the world want. So for them, what is necessary for them to have is a good, well-paying job that can improve their status in society, and also give them an income for which they can not be skating along the poverty line, which keeps them vulnerable, but actually have a decent salary, which allows them to move out of the shelter and live independently. So our organization initially focused heavily on economic independence and alternatives. And we specifically looked for jobs that would be well-paying and improve the status of women. And This will shock you all, but we found that those were jobs traditionally done by men. And the jobs traditionally done by women, such as embroidery and hairdressing, tended to be lower paid and lower status in society. So we started looking for jobs that men had traditionally done and women had been excluded from. And one of the ones that we found was goldsmithing. And we were able to, in the early years, train some of India's first women goldsmiths. You have currently a unit that is one of India's only, if not the only, all-women production unit of metalsmithing jewelry. And our survivors take tremendous pride in being pioneers in that way. And it's really been interesting to watch their identity shift from victim to survivor to pioneering woman professional and entrepreneur. So as the years went by and our programs in economic empowerment grew, we started to see other needs that we were able to work together with our partners to fill, and realized that, you know, for women to have a job training and opportunities in the future, they also needed to have safe shelter and a place, especially immediately after rescue, where they could recover physically, psychologically, where they could receive this training in a safe way, rebuild their identity, have peer support, and all those wonderful and necessary things. And so, working together with local partners, we've been able to expand 4 shelters and build an entire shelter in North India, where 100 to 150 survivors continually living and rebuilding their lives. And then finally, we were able to get involved in education at all levels, right from preschool, primary school is obviously a huge one, high school, and then college. And we've been able to support hundreds of girls and women in being able to build a bright future that way. Everything from Saba, who's becoming her community's first gynecologist, you know, to Anjali, who is a survivor who's opening up a school in her village so that girls have an alternative to being trafficked, and many, many other professions in between. So that's kind of been the scope of the journey, and here we are today, and so thankful and so excited to be partnering with you guys for the next step of the journey.
Sarah, thank you so much for that absolutely wonderful origin story. I think a lot of our members would identify with you in terms of this intellectual journey that you have taken. Can we go back to some things that you must have seen over the years in terms of your the women and the girls who come to you? Why does this happen so easily? Why is it that the criminal enterprise of the human trafficking is so successful? Why is this so hard to break? What are some of these underlying factors besides poverty, which propels everybody to leave home to look for something better?
Mm. And I think that's such an important question, and also kind of leads to talking about why this is such a problem specifically in South Asia, and what are the cultural factors. I think a very huge factor is the low status of women and girls particularly in rural communities of South Asia. In Nepal, for example, and imagine if you grow up as a girl and you see your mother every night wash your father's feet and then dip her hands in the water and put her hand in her mouth, signifying her low status, in relation to her husband. That's the kind of endemic sense of worthlessness that these girls are growing up with. And when you have a community that really, where boys are always educated first, they're fed first, their priorities, and you grow up and that's all you see, you're going to feel that your worth is very low, as a woman. And so that makes it somewhat easy to manipulate a girl into being trafficked, but it also, for women and mothers who are the next generation, they've also internalized that. So that's a huge issue. And I think another issue in India particularly, but also in Nepal, is the caste system, which, as you probably all know, has been illegal for a very long time. Yet it persists very strongly, and especially in those traditional, more likely to be traditional rural communities where people are, less educated, less exposed to progressive ideas. But everywhere in Indian society, it remains like if you were to open a newspaper to the classified ads where people are looking for partners or dating, it's always listed or just designated by caste. And then there's a tiny, category like don't care, and it's like tiny. And at the bottom, I mean, thank God for those people. But still, this caste system is a powerful underlying cultural issue that's affecting human trafficking. In the red light area where this new project is taking place, there is several castes. One of them is the Agrawali, another one's the Badi. And these castes, traditionally, hundreds of years ago, were entertainers. They were circus people, singers and dancers. They would come and perform at weddings, and they made their living that way. But when those traditional entertainments, kind of fell out of fashion, they turned to prostitution. And so these are castes in which forced prostitution is an absolute way of life and an expectation for every girl. And when a girl is born in that community, it's actually celebrated, but not for a good reason, because that's another source of income to the family. So people are really growing up with the absolute expectation that that's the only pathway for them. There's no other alternatives provided, and there's no other alternatives that they could see in the women around them in their community. Other factors that I think are certainly existing in South Asia, but also other places, is environmental factors. When you have a monoculture, people who have been living by subsistence farming, and all of a sudden climate change or environmental degradation makes it impossible for them to make their living that way. Then you have movement. You have people who are migrating in search of jobs. The whole younger generation leaves the village due to the environmental issues, and they go to the big city where, of course, they're separated from their support systems and become extremely vulnerable to human trafficking. Mm-hmm. The other issue that I didn't originally realize would become part of our work was child marriage, early marriage, and forced marriage. I thought that was a completely separate issue. Most recently, the UN has actually included the numbers of child brides in the human trafficking numbers, but also, just from a practical standpoint, when a girl is put into an early marriage or a child marriage, she becomes so much more vulnerable. Often the young couple will, move again away from the family, away from the support systems, to a big city. And girls have been trafficked, by their husbands, by their mother-in-laws, by their landladies. Again, you have a very vulnerable young girl with a, endemic sense of worthlessness, and a society that continually reinforces that. And then you have the child marriage on top of that. So we have a lot of survivors that have come to us who were originally in a child marriage, and then that led to being trafficked, or the child marriage was itself, the form of trafficking they endured. So those are just a few of the issues. Obviously, there are many others, but those are the ones that, we kind of see the most often, and our girls talk about as being reasons that they believe they became especially vulnerable.
Sarah, we're running out of time, but we would love to keep talking. I hope some of the chapters in Florida will invite you to speak, and so you can elaborate on some of these issues. It's absolutely wonderful that what you're offering them is economic opportunities and options, and also care for the young children of the women so that they are not trafficked or continue this in an intergenerational way. These issues are systemic, endemic. I think all of us are going to have to support each other in, helping the women and offering them opportunities so that they can escape this and write their own futures. Any last thoughts, Sarah, as we say goodbye?
I just want to say thank you to the community for supporting the effort. In the red light areas where this project is going on, the need is critical. Kids are living in one room in a brothel with their mother who's seeing clients. And of course, they're incredibly vulnerable. 90% of the girls in that community have been sexually exploited by the age of 8. And without a focused long-term intervention, their chances of escaping the cycle of exploitation are small to non-existent. So it's really critical to provide them with that kind of support. And we're grateful to be able to do it in close partnership with incredible local organizations. And I look forward to sharing success stories throughout the year with you guys, and I'm just so thankful for this partnership as well.
Oh, you're welcome, Sarah. Best wishes for a very, very successful project. Before I wrap up, I just wanted to remind all our Dining for Women viewers who are watching this video, we are taping this in on February 13th. So the month of March is still ahead of us right now. Some of you may watch this recording well after some of the events are over and done with, but do go to our website to upcoming events under the Join Us tab. We have the March 8th International Women's Day event. We have CSW 63 happening. I hope we see you at these events, and thank you for chiming in and enjoying this conversation with us. Thank you.